Hey guys, this is Jared. Welcome to the very first episode of Around the Bird Bath. So we decided let's let Dan run with this thing, man. Let's have a spin-off podcast, if you will, for baseball. So we've got a new name, new title for our baseball podcast. Dan's flying solo on this one. It was a quick turnaround. We just did our baseball season preview in episode 207. So this will be our first Around the Bird Bath baseball dedicated podcast. We've had some baseball pods in the past, but we really want to make them have their own kind of feel to it. So we're going to have some unique branding for Around the Bird Bath. Maybe have some new music. Big shout out to Dan flying solo on this podcast. It's a hard thing to do, folks. And just sit there and talk to yourself for 30 minutes. It's a lot harder than it sounds on paper. I can attest to that. And Dan did an awesome job in his first episode around the bird bath. And of course, we'll rotate myself and Adrian in here when we can, get some guests in, hopefully get you guys some real premium baseball coverage, throughout the rest of the season and hopefully for years to come. So thank you guys all for your support. We got awesome feedback from our first podcast with Dan this week in episode 207. We previewed the Roadrunners baseball season and recapped last year a little bit as well. Ton of retweets and likes on Twitter. So that was awesome to see it get that reach, and a lot of current and former baseball players, baseball parents and stuff showing love. So if you're listening, thank you guys so much. That word of mouth really makes a big difference for us. No doubt about it. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and lead into, Dan walking through the first weekend previews for UTSA this season. We've got Tarleton State coming up. You guys will be listening to this on Friday. So, first day of the season, it's officially baseball season. And then the following weekend, UTSA will be playing St. Mary's of California. So great insight from Dan on that. Talks a little bit about UTSA's preseason all-conference selections for Roadrunners picked to the All-Conference USA team this year. Some updates on some rule changes, in college baseball and MLB this year. And Dan also shares a very cool personal story about baseball, which I love. That's an addition to the podcast. I'll have to jump in and share some of my baseball glory days stories. It's gonna be good stuff. But of course, before we do want to say thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers. It's a good time, as always, to sign up for Patreon. We actually have a very special segment that we're going to be running, I think, next week. A Where Are They Now interview with some UTSA baseball alumni. I watched that recording, or listened to that recording last night, and I really enjoyed all the stories the guys had to share. I'm not quite there mentally because I just got back from watching UTSA basketball at Rice, and they got a win. So I didn't really know how to process that information. And the women won as well. And, according to a tweet from Rowdy Report, it was the first time since, I think, January 2020 that both the men's and women's basketball programs had won on the same night. That's, that's hard to process. That's a lot of information. Anyways, back to the point. Sorry, got squirrel brain there. I want to say thank you to all of our big money donors on Patreon, including Ben Tovar, Rick Cortez of Rowdy Road Grillers, the Bunch family, Zach Espericueta and the San Antonio Podcast Network, Brandon Patron and the Fikes family. And as always, thank you to our Board of Trustees members, including Digiteek, John Alwell, Leno Perez of Los Dos Rowdy's Tailgating, Gary and Ruben representing the UTSA Bird Gang Tailgate, Ray Redding and Meet Me Apparel, Brandon Grill and the Grill Realty Group, and Andy Elizalde and Proficient Benefit Solutions. So thank you guys all so much for your continued support, for enabling us to bring on contributors like Dan and compensate them and make sure it's worth their time to become a part of our community and bring you guys the content that you've been craving. We heard you guys loud and clear, and we're ready to send it full bore. We're waving the runner around third, and he's coming home for play the plate, baby. Let's go. Let's cut on over to Dan, and thank you guys for listening.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another segment of Around the Bird Bath. I'm your host, Dan Nerdahl. Thank you for listening. Once again, we got things kicked off a few days ago with Jared and Adrian, little season preview, looking ahead. It's exciting to see all of the momentum and all the excitement around UTSA men's baseball program with the season just a few short days away, depending on when you're listening to this. And I think a lot of the players, a lot of fans, a lot of students, everyone involved with UTSA baseball, and then others that are covering it as well. They recognize the potential that this season has, the excitement that this season brings coming off of last year, and also just everyone coming back this year and what Coach Hallmark and his staff are doing at UTSA. So what we're kind of hoping and what our goal is with this and what we're thinking is doing a bi-weekly weekend preview. And so what that means is I'll kind of cover the weekend coming up, and then the following weekend, just doing kind of like a quick look at the teams coming down, maybe some history that they might have or may not have with UTSA, how that team fared last year, what their record was, if they made it to regionals, the improvements that they're looking to make, key players that they have. That way, going into the weekend series, you kind of have an idea of maybe who their star pitchers are, who their best offensive output is, and what changes they might have made from last year to this year. Starting off, we're not going to necessarily cover the midweek games in the weekend previews. Rather, we're going to try to start out and do a weekend recap. So we'll kind of cover the weekend, discuss the box score, who really performed well, maybe some performances we would have liked to see. And then in that feature that might be more of a blog format, probably, that's when we'll look ahead to the midweek game, or maybe the next two midweek games, since we're going to be doing this bi-weekly and preview it that way. Just give you a mix of the blog and the podcast. It's really going to be up to you guys as the Dome heads to give the feedback for what you like and how you like this format, how you don't like it, what you would like to see instead, any suggestions you'd like to see myself cover, maybe having guests on if possible, or just providing different facts. Maybe if a team, how often does a team that we're facing make it to regional? What's their history like? Things like that. And we're really just kind of an open book and willing to listen to your guys' ideas for how to make this better and provide you guys the coverage that you want to have.
So before we get started looking at Tarleton State and St. Mary's, California, I want to just go ahead and put in a quick editor's note, if you'll call it. When I was discussing the season preview with Jared and Adrian, totally slipped my mind, and I left off the Roadrunners who made the Conference USA preseason all-conference team. Definitely want to give those guys their proper recognition and mention that. And again, just got caught up in discussing all things baseball, had it in my notes, but accidentally glazed over it. But also, looking at that, you've got Ladenberry, no surprise, at second base, Luke Malone, starting pitcher, and then your two relievers, Daniel Schaefer and Simon Miller. So those are your four members, your four Roadrunners that are on the Conference USA preseason all-conference. Very encouraging to see three pitchers on there, because if you listened to the season preview, and then we'll discuss in this segment as well, just the need for the Roadrunners to make some improvements at pitching, and having relievers and a starter on there is encouraging. So apologies to those gentlemen for leaving that off initially, but wanted to make sure to get that on there and recognize the hard work they put in, and hopefully they can follow up the preseason honors and find themselves in the postseason all-conference team and add some other teammates on there as well. Enjoy the segment looking ahead to the weekend previews.
So with that, let's get into these weekend previews. Going to be looking at opening weekend and the following weekend. Both going to be happening at the Bird Bath, a span of 7 games. 3 games this weekend and 4 games next weekend with the doubleheader. We'll get more into that. Coming to town, coming to San Antonio this Friday, we've got the Tarleton State University Texans. UTSA opened up the season against them last season, but it was up in Stevensville. This year we get them down here at the Bird Bath. There wasn't a lot of history. Last year was actually the first year that UTSA played Tarleton State in baseball. The reason being, as I was doing some research and just finding out that they are very new to Division I. They just came up to Division I a few years ago. They still don't actually have full Division I privileges. They're still coming off probation and everything like that. Very successful at Division II, though. Very good Lakeland Conference runs, several conference championships in the Lakeland Conference, and starting to make some improvements. Had a little bit rough go of it last year. Had some defensive issues, had some pitching issues. Kind of saw that correlate in the scores last year against UTSA. But, really hoping to turn a corner this year and build on the momentum as they spend more time or find some momentum rather as they find some more time in Division I and are able to work with those recruits. And it can be tough being successful at Division II. Obviously, you're coming up to Division I now. There's something like 23 Division I baseball teams in Texas alone. And that can be tough because now the recruits that you're vying for, they're Division I caliber, some very, very historic Texas baseball teams at the Division I level. So it might take a little while for them to work their way up. Obviously, if you listen to the season preview, we talked about how your opponent having a good winning percentage helps you in the RPI because the opponent winning percentage factors in. You also want your opponents playing quality opponents because your opponent's winning percentage gets factored in as well. But let's kind of look at some things with Tarleton State to look for this weekend and just talking about them in general. Last year, I mentioned, was the first series first time the two teams met up. UTSA won 2 of those 3 games. They outscored Tarleton State 34 to 25, excuse me. They did lose the final game of the series 12-1. And it'd be real good if UTSA could just sweep them this year, add that extra win to the record that they didn't have last season. Tarleton State last year, 16-36 overall, 10-20 in conference play. RPI 257 and straight to schedule 156. So wins are wins. Looking at some other things for how the college baseball powers that be see them finishing up. Not necessarily a strong RPI ranking, but wins still help too, and building that confidence, especially with when UTSA is playing them, and having some good wins going into the game against Houston next week on Wednesday, and knocking the rust off. The boys have been practicing for a few weeks. Obviously, they had fall ball a few months ago, but nothing beats just getting out there and playing a meaningful game and playing against some competition, and you're not playing against your buddies anymore. And now you can actually have somebody else that is trying to win as well face off against you, and that brings out some competition as well. Tarleton State University, they're in the Western Athletic Conference, the WAC. Some notable teams in that conference, several teams in that conference that UTSA will face this season in single games. But Sam Houston State University, UTSA faces them, I want to say May 1st, early May. Sam Houston State is projected to finish second in the WAC behind, I want to say, Grand Canyon. I'll verify that and I'll come back to that. But California Baptist, and then University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, UTSA faces them as well. And already kind of mentioned this a little bit, but D1 baseball projects Tarleton State finishing 11th out of 13 in the WAC. And so, good opportunity to get some good wins, get off to a good start, and then some of the improvements that we're going to talk about here in just a second that Tarleton State has made will be good to kind of see how UTSA is getting started off on the offense side of things. So the defense looks to have improved from last year, and the pitching also looks to have improved. This is encouraging for the Texans coming in this weekend. I mentioned already, they gave up 34 runs to UTSA. And we kind of mentioned in the season preview, UTSA had 4 key departures from last season. Very losing some power, obviously losing the leaders. All 4 of them were leaders on the team. And it'll be interesting to see how the transfers that we mentioned for UTSA and just the team in general can match up against the pitching that looks to have improved. Key players to watch: Jamie Perez. He's their catcher. He's very athletic and good hitting. Sometimes you'll see that catchers, maybe they are a little, their batting percentage, their batting average is a little lower. Their points are a little lower, but he's not your typical catcher in that regard. A lot of times bats lead off for the Texans. He's going to be looking to make some noise this weekend. Jordan Andrade, he's a transfer from University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Quality defense at second base, and that kind of follows suit with what we already mentioned, that it looks like the Texans made some improvements on defense. So it'll be interesting to see if this weekend has the same scoring output. Obviously, as a road runner, want to see the Birds get off to a great start and put some runs on the board, and we'll see how the Texans can respond to that. Getting into their pitchers, mentioned that pitching was an issue last year. They had a lot of injuries and they had some lack in the depth department, but their ERA was a 7.05. Not exactly sure where that lined up nationally. We mentioned that UTSA being at 5.40 was 123 out of 300 teams. So have to imagine that Tarleton State being in the 7s, even further down that list, and that can be a big problem for a team. Getting down early, getting down big early, tapping into that bullpen early, especially in a weekend series. But Dylan DeLucio, he looks to be kind of the Friday night guy for Tarleton State. And then Isaiah Campa, he's coming off of injury. He had an injury last year that put him out after only 3 starts, but he did have 16 strikeouts through those 3 starts. So those two, imagine to see both of them this weekend. And they're going to hopefully put a competitive team on the field, and should be some exciting matchups and some exciting games to see this weekend. It's also going to be interesting to see what their bullpen does, as they also made some improvements and look to help out on those runs. So as I mentioned, that's this weekend. I believe it's going to be a Friday night game, a Saturday night game, and a Sunday midday game. Come out to the Bird Bath, support our guys, watch some good baseball. With that being said, since we're going to be covering Houston in the weekend recap, let's get into the next weekend's series against St. Mary's, California, the Gales, not to be mistaken with St. Mary's here in Texas, a Division I team, a Division II team, but this Division I team from California coming to town. Already mentioned doubleheader on Saturday. It'll be interesting to see what Coach Hallmark does on Saturday with having 2 games. If they try to have a starter go a little longer, save the bullpen. If they make one of the games a bullpen game where you kind of tap into that bullpen right away and just supplement and try to have a couple guys go 3-4 innings. First time in school history that these programs are facing off. So St. Mary's, California is in the West Coast Conference, WCC. Some notable teams there: San Diego, Gonzaga, and BYU. Last year, St. Mary, California went 25-30, 9-18 in conference play. They had an RPI of 204, strength of schedule of 221. So a very similar situation as Tarleton State. A great opportunity to get some wins, get the bats moving again, have the pitching staff get off to a great start, and get some momentum going to that midweek game and really have the season get off to a great start. Similar to Tarleton State, where Tarleton State's projected to finish lower in their conference, St. Mary's is projected to finish 8th out of 10. Last year kind of had a mix. Their pitching was the top 75 nationally, but their batting was, or their offense was bottom 100 nationally in most offensive categories. So that's a hard opposite. You've got good pitching, but at the same time, you're not really getting the runs. So as great as pitchers can be, if you give up 2-3 runs, 4 or 5 runs, and you're only getting 1 or 2 runs a game, then that can be difficult. This is going to be good for the Roadrunners because they have strong pitching, but they're still maybe a weaker team. I don't want to jump ahead too much on that and predict an easy weekend series. They are a Division I baseball team, but you are facing a team that is known for their pitching, and that's kind of their strength. So it will be interesting to see, similar to Tarleton State, how the hitters match up against some better pitchers and what type of production they can put out there right away. The head coach, Greg Moore, he says that Jason Wrights, who's a freshman coming off elbow injury, is the best he ever had. Similar to one of those things, Jared talked about in the football signing day podcast. If you listen to that, there were a couple guys that, because of positions that they played in high school or positions they might have had to play their senior year, it might have actually helped UTSA because Power 5 programs might have overlooked them and not put as much time into them, even though they had the talent there for their true position. With Jason Wrights, unfortunately, coming off of injury last year, that might be the reason that he's at St. Mary's, California. Not drawing a lot of attention. He had Tommy John surgery. That's become more widely known with Brock Purdy of the 49ers injuring or tearing part of his UCL in the NFC Championship game against the Eagles. And so more people are familiar with UCL. Unfortunately, a common injury in baseball. Bryce Harper got it last year. So position players can work around it a little more, or they can kind of work through their season depending on when it happens and how serious it is. But we'll see how he rebounds. Obviously, a lot of raw talent, and they definitely saw some things they liked before the injury. And then they also have NJCAA transfer Derek Iguinto. He had a 1.48 ERA in 85 innings last year at NJCAA. It'll be interesting to see how that correlates to the Division I level and how the Roadrunners can, if they can get to him early, and how they can hit off of him, because he looks to be their Friday night guy. Position players, Christian Almanza, he was the most consistent offensive production last year. He had 323, 7 home runs, and 26 RBIs in 34 games before he had a non-baseball related injury, but doesn't really seem to be a problem coming into this season. And then you had Division II transfer Bill Ralston, provides some left-handed power at bat, and then shortstop Gavin Napier. He hit 301, but his on-base percentage a little higher because he got more walks than strikeouts. They have some concern in the outfield, and their outfielder are upperclassmen. They still haven't broken out yet, so this might be an interesting weekend to see how they start off their season, or how they're starting off their season, rather. They do have a new hitting coach that seems to have made a good implementation of his philosophy, and he seems to be making a difference. So similar to what we mentioned with UTSA, the batters and the position players we've lost some of that power. Also mentioned the pitching being a little bit of an issue last year. So you have some position players for St. Mary's that are looking to get their season started off and really get off to a good start, where you have the UTSA pitchers that obviously want to do the same. So this would be a great way for them to build some confidence and make some noise to start off the season. So those are the notes I've got on Tarleton State and St. Mary's. That's kind of what you can expect with this. Nothing too deep into the weeds, nothing too crazy. Just a nice little preview at how the teams fared last year, how they're looking this year, maybe some improvements they made, and things to look for, some players to watch for. I want to talk briefly about some specific baseball rule changes for the NCAA. That's been a hot topic for MLB this offseason. Talking about a lot of things with banning the shift, pitch clock implementation, size of the bases, and college is seeing some of those rule changes as well. Already mentioned in the season preview some things that are happening more in an administrative type way or a postseason type way, with eventually the field increasing. There hasn't been anything formal on that yet. The goal is, or the plan is, just to eventually increase the size of the field. But same thing with pitch clock, or the pitching. We'll just call it the pitch clock with college versus MLB. College has actually had the pitch clock for a few years. Pitchers were able to exploit it and manipulate it a little bit because they could step off at any point, and that would essentially reset it. Now there's a new rule effective this year that they can only step off the mound or do a pickoff attempt or a fake throw over to first, one per at bat, and then the next time they wouldn't be able to do that. So not going to be able to just step off and throw over to first and restart it. They're going to monitor that and enforce that a lot more. And then starting 2024, by January 1st of 2024, all Division I teams have to install at least one visible action clock or pitch clock that can be seen. So it'll be interesting to see where they put that at the Bird Bath next season. Definitely seems like, though, with that enforcement, that this is here to stay and it's not going anywhere. It shortens the games. Minor league has been doing it for a few years now, or a few seasons, and they're averaging 2.5 hours for a game. College's NCAA last year, I think, was right around 2 hours and 59 minutes average. So cutting the game down 30 minutes, I'm okay with it as long as it doesn't interrupt the flow of the game or change the sport too much. I understand they want to make the product more, they want to reach more fans, they want to bring new fans in. They're thinking that if the games are less, it'll be easier for the fans, will be more willing to watch it. We'll see what it changes. Baseball is it's a unique game. It's a certain type of game. So as long as that doesn't change, I'm okay with them speeding it up a little bit. It is interesting to see some of the minor league pitchers that came up last year and just how much faster they were, because the minor league, the MILB, has already been using it for a few seasons. So when that young pitcher comes up and he's working real quick, it definitely gets some of the veteran MLB players a little off their timing, catches them off guard, at least the first time through the lineup. Then they get the timing down and everything. And it doesn't have as much of a factor, but it does help with the games. So fence padding. So beginning in 2023, a minimum 3-foot fence or protective netting must be in place on the field side of dugouts. This will be interesting too at the Bird Bath, because a big area where you're going to see this is open dugouts. You're not going to be able to have open dugouts anymore. You're going to have a fence there, and the netting as well. I think the Bird Bath already has the the fence up. That's bad reporting on my end to not remember that or not. I know they've been making a lot of changes, but regardless, by January 1st, 2024, fences must be installed. And then they also recommend padding be added to all the hard surfaces the player could collide with during play. So player safety is obviously important. On-field props, everyone likes a good celebration. Football has some good celebrations. Baseball has some exciting ones, but beginning in 2023, celebratory props will not be allowed outside of the dugout. I don't know if it's a safety issue. I don't know if it's just a taunting issue. You know, some more well-known, common celebrations that this particular article mentions is Tennessee's fur coat, the OSU Cowboy hat, Virginia Tech's hammer, and they just have to stay inside the dugout. So if you're a fan, try to look inside the dugout, or hopefully the TV cameras for the games that have more than 2 cameras will be able to get the dugout celebration so we can see the players having a good time with that. Just looking and seeing if there's any big ones. Some minor ones, coaching appeals must be made in the middle of the respective foul line, not the dirt circle around home plate. Just kind of meet in the middle. I'm sure there's a good reason for that, or just want to, I guess, respect the home umpire's area. And then this is kind of an interesting one as well, either by conference rule or mutual consent between the 2 teams. A game could be completed with 1 umpire. Those are really, as I was kind of looking around, those were some of the bigger ones I saw. There might be some little ones here and there that stand out. But again, as long as it doesn't change the game of baseball, and as long as they can justify it in a way that helps the game, it's a lot of times you see these rules too. And if they feel like, and they maybe don't always say this, but if they feel like the offense has some more advantages or the pitchers have some more advantages, they'll, interestingly enough, make some rules that might benefit the pitcher more, benefit the batter more. Big one in that being the shift. So they think that might produce some more offense. They think the bigger bases might create some more stealing. We'll see what it does. We'll see how it changes. So those are the rule changes. And then I just thought it might be neat to kind of finish these segments with a baseball memory of mine, something from me growing up, whether playing the game itself or just taking a trip with my dad or my brothers or friends, or just things at the bird bath. The one I want to go with, kicking off this segment, has to do with the Alamodome, but not football. And my very first time at the Alamodome was for not a football game. It was for a baseball game, and it was an exhibition against the Rangers and the Astros. And this was before the Astros were good. It was about 10, 11 years ago. I had a close friend. I would spend holiday weekends with him and his family up in Kerrville. And one particular time, it was an earlier Easter, and MLB season hadn't started yet. And I think it was maybe starting like the following weekend. So Houston and Texas came together and did an exhibition game at the Alamodome. I don't even remember where we sat. I know it was like super high up, and one of my contact lenses fell out, and so I couldn't really see very well. But still, you hear the crack of the bat and the buzz of the crowd. It's neat now to see it full for. Can't even talk. It's neat now to see my experience with the Alamodome come full circle. Now that I'm a student at UTSA, going to games at the Alamodome, having the very first experience be a baseball game, kind of neat. And, always enjoy seeing good baseball be played. And it's interesting to see just the same way they can turn a baseball stadium into a football field. They can turn a football venue into a baseball field. Wouldn't maybe want to watch 162 games there, but it worked that time, and great first experience with the Alamodome. So we'll see how many stories I can come up with, and hopefully they give a little look into my fandom with baseball and my love for baseball, as I mentioned on the season preview. That's all I've got for you guys. Like I said, this is kind of just a running project, just seeing how it hits with you guys and how it lands, and we'll mold it throughout. I'll try to be more prepared with my notes and just work on it as we go. But hope you guys enjoyed it, and looking forward to an exciting season. Come out to the Bird Bath, support the team, and watch some good baseball while you're at it. Thank you. Y'all have a good one.